What if everything happening in your life right now, every challenge, delay, and disappointment, isn't a punishment, but a message? What if the universe isn't testing you, but teaching you through the mirror of your own vibration? This isn't about changing your reality. It's about awakening within it. Many seek to change their lives, trying to escape their own reality. Many seek to change their lives, trying to escape their own reality. They want a new story, but they keep rejecting the chapter they're living now. They search for answers in courses, rituals, books, in the words of masters and gurus, and still nothing changes. Because the truth that few have the courage to face is simple, direct, and uncomfortable. Your current reality isn't punishing you, it's awakening you. This is the part that hurts. Most people do want to hear that what they're reliving today is the perfect reflection of their own vibration of what they feed within themselves every day. It's easier to blame fate, others, the system, than to look straight into the mirror the universe shows you. But it's precisely this mirror that contains the code of transformation. Everything that bothers you now didn't come to defeat you, it came to reveal you. And the more you try to run away, the more life insists on placing you before the same lessons, just with different faces. Itzhak Bentov used to say that reality is a learning instrument, a vibrational school where each experience leads you to a new level of consciousness. What imprisons you isn't what happens, but the way you interpret what happens. This is the hard truth. There's no spiritual leap without crossing through your own shadow. There's no co-creation without acceptance of what is. But there's a liberating side to this revelation. Because the instant you understand that reality isn't your enemy, but your ally, everything changes. Suffering loses its meaning and pain transforms into an impulse for growth. That's at this point that you begin to see that the power to change is in the future. It's now in the way you choose to look at life. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How to transform the present into a portal of consciousness, dissolve self-sabotage, and finally awaken to the creator that has always been there inside you. The human mind, so accustomed to running after what hasn't arrived yet, often doesn't notice the treasure that pulses within what already is. Many believe that the present is merely a consequence of the past, an inevitable effect of choices made, accumulated pains, and postponed hopes. However, there's a turning point that few see. The now is not a residue of yesterday, but the portal that leads to the creation of tomorrow. This reality, however limited or uncomfortable it may seem, contains within itself all the necessary elements for the being to awaken and co-create something new. When a human being rejects the present moment, trying to escape it with distractions, expectations, or idealized memories, they are in fact denying the very laboratory where transformation happens. Consciousness doesn't flourish in flight, but in presence. What lies before the eyes, even if it seems like chaos, is the silent invitation to perceive oneself beyond form, beyond circumstances. The current reality, however challenging, is the most precise tool that life itself offers to refine perception, align frequencies, and expand understanding of what it truly means to be the creator of one's own experience. Many seek spiritual portals, sacred retreats, enlightened masters, or transcendent experiences as if salvation were hidden at some distant point. But all this external search only prolongs the distance from what is essential. The true initiation begins when one faces the common routine with new eyes. When the simple gesture of breathing, working, conversing, and even suffering gains a dimension of deep learning. What seemed banal reveals itself as the fertile ground where the spirit learns to transform density into wisdom. Itzhak Bentov used to say that consciousness expands to the extent that the being observes itself with neutrality. This is the first step. Stop fighting against what is. Conflict with the present generates energetic friction, and this friction consumes the creative force that could be used to transmute reality. The current instant, however imperfect it may seem, is not an enemy, it's a mirror. It reflects exactly the internal state of the observer. There's no punishment, only vibrational correspondence. When one accepts this reflection, something begins to change subtly. Resistance gives way to understanding, and what seemed like a prison becomes a passage. Reality in its purest form is a field of energy in constant mutation, responding to the impulses of consciousness. Denying the now is like trying to paint a picture without touching the canvas. It's in direct contact with what's happening that the power to alter what will come manifests. And as this perception matures, a new understanding insinuates itself between the lines. If the present is the portal, then the artist who crosses through it is consciousness itself. And it is consciousness that, upon awakening, begins to mold the universe around it in a way that few dare to fully comprehend. When consciousness awakens to the fact that the external world is not cause, but effect, the entire logic of existence begins to reverse. What previously seemed solid and unquestionable starts to reveal its malleable nature. What is seen, what is lived, and what is felt are reflections of an internal field that vibrates, communicates, and responds in perfect synchrony with the state of mind and heart. Einstein said that you cannot solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it. And this is one of the deepest truths that humanity still resists accepting. Reality in its totality is not fixed. It's a quantum mirror constantly responding to what is projected from within. When someone insists on seeing themselves as a victim of circumstances, they feed a type of energy that reinforces their own prison. But when one understands that each emotion, thought, and intention are waves that interact with the invisible fabric of the universe, the power to recreate destiny is born. What changes the world is not the force of isolated will, but the vibrational state that sustains that will. This is why so many attempts at change fail, because one tries to reform the form when the root is in the frequency. The human mind, when aligned with inner clarity, acts as a transmitter. It doesn't just observe reality. It imprints it. Each judgment, each belief, each interpretation of what is lived is like a code that consciousness inserts into the matrix of the rail. When the code changes, the result also changes. It's not about manipulating the world, but about understanding that the world is a continuous projection of the consciousness that observes it. Awakening, therefore, is not a miraculous event. It's a process of perceptive refinement. As the human being begins to look at events without the weight of fear or guilt, they expand their field of vision and access more subtle levels of understanding. In this state, challenges cease to be problems to solve and become mirrors of self-knowledge. The frequency changes, and with it the way reality responds changes. Itzhak Bentov said that the universe is a great dance of frequencies, and that each thought is a note in this symphony. When consciousness vibrates in harmony, life responds coherently. This is the natural law of the cosmos. Everything is resonance. What is thought and felt is transmitted as a signal that finds its correspondence in the field of matter. And the more conscious one is of this process, the more refined the act of co-creation becomes. Over time, one perceives that reality doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be reinterpreted. Genuine transformation begins when one changes the way they look at what happens, when they stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is my consciousness creating this for?" This simple inversion changes the axis of existence, and when this new point of view stabilizes, a clarity is born that leads the being to the next stage, understanding why so many still sabotage their own power, believing that something outside themselves holds control over destiny. There's a moment in the path of consciousness when the human being, already understanding that they shape their own reality, perceives something even more subtle: internal resistance. It's at this point that many stumble, because even knowing the laws of the universe, They continue to act as if the power were outside themselves. They wait for signs, opportunities, divine rescues, when in truth, creation begins within. It's easy to believe in the law of attraction, when everything flows, but when life seems stagnant, when results don't come, the mind quickly creates excuses. Maybe it's not for me, maybe it doesn't work. And that's where self-sabotage is born. Victimhood is the most convincing disguise of unconsciousness. It feeds on the idea that something or someone has the power to determine destiny. But by sustaining this belief, the person continues vibrating in lack. And this vibration is the link that binds them to the same experiences. The energy of the victim is dense because it carries guilt, fear, and powerlessness. That of the creator, on the other hand, is light because it's born from responsibility. And responsibility is not weight, it's power in its purest form. When the mind convinces itself that something external needs to change for happiness to come, it transfers its creative force outward. It waits for the miracle, the encounter, the opportunity, the other's change. But all waiting is a denial of the present. While one waits, one doesn't vibrate. And the universe doesn't respond to words, but to frequencies. It's not wanting that creates, it's being. That's why, while someone says, "I want abundance," but feels lack, it's lack that manifests. The miracle was never distant. It always manifests in the same proportion as the being trusts their own power. Life responds with precision to the internal state, not to empty intentions. Many study, meditate, recite affirmations, but deep down still carry the fear of not being capable. It's this doubt that fragments the vibration like an out-of-tune note in a symphony trying to harmonize. Self-sabotage is silent. It manifests in small escapes, in distractions, in spiritual procrastination. It doesn't destroy explosively. It delays subtly the awakening. But true awakening begins when the person stops looking for culprits and begins to observe themselves. When they understand that there's no failure in the universe, only vibrational feedback. Everything that arrives at the human experience is a perfect reflection of the inner frequency. This realization can hurt because it eliminates all excuses, but it's precisely this pain that heals. It's the point at which the being stops waiting for the miracle and recognizes themselves as the miracle itself. In this instant, something changes forever. Victimhood loses strength and self-sabotage begins to dissolve, not through repression, but through consciousness. The energy that was previously used to resist transforms into creative impulse. And when this new posture is established, a deep understanding emerges that the power to manifest is intrinsically linked to a simple but transformative emotion: gratitude. The consciousness that awakens to its own power soon realizes that the key to maintaining this elevated vibration lies in gratitude. And it's not about thanking in a mechanical way like someone fulfilling a spiritual ritual, but about deeply feeling the value of what is already present. Gratitude is the language of abundance. And whoever masters it learns to communicate with the universe without needing to ask. The grateful being doesn't wait, they recognize. And by recognizing, they vibrate. This vibration is the purest signal of alignment between the human and the divine. Many believe that abundance will come when there are more reasons to be grateful. But the process is inverse. It's the reasons for gratitude that create abundance. The quantum field responds to the frequency of feeling, not to the logic of deservingness. When the heart vibrates in gratitude, even in the face of small things, the roof that shelters, the food that sustains, the clothing that protects, it emits an energetic signature of fullness. And the energy of fullness can only attract more fullness. The mind accustomed to comparing and desiring what hasn't arrived yet tends to move away from this state. It believes that happiness is in the future when a certain goal is achieved, when life improves. But gratitude dissolves this illusion. It brings attention to the present, to what is real now. And in this now, the entire universe manifests because time is just a sequence of perceptions, and the only point where creation truly happens is this instant. Itzhak Bentov said that the now is like the center of a whirlwind of energy. It's the immobile point from which everything moves. Whoever anchors themselves in it accesses the intelligence of the field. Gratitude functions as the axis that stabilizes consciousness. When the being vibrates in gratitude, there is no space for fear or scarcity, because both are projections of the future, and gratitude keeps them in the present, in the state where everything is possible. The practice of gratitude, when sincere, begins to reconfigure the perception of reality. Small annoyances lose the weight they had. Situations previously seen as problems start to be recognized as opportunities for expansion. The mind stops fighting against the flow and begins to cooperate with it. It's at this point that life becomes less about controlling and more about allowing. And what is allowed flourishes naturally without effort. The power of now isn't in stopping time, but in perceiving that it never needed to be controlled. The present is the stage of creation, and gratitude is the light that illuminates it. The one who understands this no longer lives waiting for signs, because feeling itself becomes the sign. And as this consciousness expands, an even deeper perception emerges that it's possible to go beyond feeling and rewrite from the inside out. The entire narrative that sustains one's own life. When gratitude becomes a natural state, the mind begins to quiet and consciousness opens to something more vast. The possibility of reprogramming one's own perception. At this point, the human being begins to understand that they don't see the world as it is, but as they were conditioned to see it. Each past experience shaped internal lenses that distort present reality. Memories loaded with unresolved emotions create invisible filters that make the person react instead of choose. But the beauty of consciousness lies precisely in its plasticity. Just as the body renews itself, the mind can also be reconfigured. Neuroscience confirms what ancient masters already intuited. Memory is malleable. It's not a fixed recording, but a construction that alters every time it's accessed. This means that the past is not written in stone. It's a script in constant revision. What imprisons the being is not the fact itself, but the narrative created around it. When the narrative changes, the meaning changes, and when the meaning changes, the emotion that sustained it dissolved. Thus, the past ceases to be an anchor and becomes fuel for expansion. Itzhak Bentov said that consciousness is a precision instrument and that learning to use it is like tuning a violin. The more the being observes itself, the more they perceive internal dissonances. Beliefs that repeat old patterns, fears that sabotage new possibilities, stories that no longer serve. The reprogramming process is not about erasing what was lived, but about reinterpreting. It's looking at pain and seeing in it the training of the soul, looking at error and perceiving the wisdom that formed from it. With each new perception, reality changes form. What previously seemed impossible becomes accessible. Opportunities that seemed distant begin to approach, not because the world changed, but because the gaze changed. Consciousness, upon expanding, attracts experiences compatible with the new level of understanding. And the clearer this perception becomes, the more conscious the process of co-creation is. This reprogramming also requires presence. It's not enough to understand intellectually. One must feel. Each time an old emotion arises, it brings with it the invitation for a different choice. Instead of reacting, the being observes. Instead of blaming, understands. Instead of fleeing, embraces. And in this simple act of embracing, the pattern dissolves. The energy once trapped in the past is released, becoming vital force for the present. Reality then begins to respond differently. Relationships change, synchronicities increase, and the flow of life becomes lighter. All this happens because perception has been recalibrated. Consciousness learned to see the same world but from a higher point, and when the gaze rises, the vibration itself follows. Still, the path doesn't end here. For conscious manifestation requires not only inner vision, but balance between acting and being. When perception transforms and the being begins to rewrite their own story, a new stage emerges, learning to balance internal movement with external movement. Because consciousness, however awakened it may be, needs expression in the world. It's not enough to understand reality from within. Because consciousness, however awakened it may be, needs expression in the world. It's not enough to understand reality from within. One must manifest it through gestures, choices, and actions. This is the point where many get lost. Either they act without consciousness or they wait for the universe to do everything alone. Neither path brings lasting result. True manifestation is born from the balance point between internalization and action. Internalization is the space of silence where the being listens to their own essence without the noise of expectations. It's in this silence that intentions align and the creative impulse purifies itself. Action in turn is the movement that anchors this intention in matter. One doesn't exist without the other. Contemplation without attitude transforms into stagnation. Action without consciousness becomes dispersion. The balance between the two is what allows manifestation to happen harmoniously, fluidly, and coherently with the soul's purpose. Itzhak Bentov taught that the expansion of consciousness is not a leap, but a pulsation, a cyclical movement of contraction and expansion, just like the beating of the heart. There are moments of withdrawal when the being needs to turn inward and integrate what they've learned. And there are moments of expression when the learning needs to be lived, shared, and applied. This natural oscillation is the very rhythm of evolution. Forcing action without listening is walking blindly. Remaining only in introspection is letting life's flow stagnate. Conscious manifestation is gradual. It's like planting a seed and caring for the soil every day without anxiety for the result. Each step taken in alignment with the heart is a vibrational confirmation. Even pauses are part of the process, for it's in them that energy reorganizes itself. The universe doesn't work in haste but in precision. Time in this context is just a space for the internal frequency to stabilize and reality to adjust to it. The one who understands this rhythm stops being frustrated by the apparent delay of things. They understand that each experience, each challenge is a stage of refinement. The consciousness that desires to grow doesn't flee from internal work, but also doesn't avoid external movement. It understands that both are expressions of the same creative flow. The true master doesn't wait for the perfect moment. They create it acting with presence, feeling each gesture as an extension of the soul itself. And when this harmony between acting and being stabilizes, life becomes a dance between the invisible and the concrete. Each breath is a prayer. Each action is a response. The entire universe begins to cooperate with the one who vibrates in this harmony. And it's precisely at this point that the journey completes itself, not as an end, but as the beginning of a new way of existing, where each instant becomes an opportunity to co-create, evolve, and awaken. At each instant, the universe asks you, what frequency do you choose to sustain now? And this answer isn't in words, but in feeling. It's in how you wake up and how you react to challenges and how you treat those who cross your path. Co-creation happens in the everyday, not in the extraordinary. It's in the simple gesture, in conscious breathing, in the choice to be grateful even when the mind wants to complain. So the question that remains is, are you going to keep waiting for a miracle, or are you going to become the miracle your life is asking for? Are you going to keep blaming the world? Or are you going to realize that everything that surrounds you is a reflection of your own state of consciousness? Change doesn't begin when the scenery changes. It begins when your gaze changes and the world inevitably follows. If this video touched something inside you, if it awakened a spark of clarity or a desire to know yourself more deeply, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications to continue expanding this consciousness with me. Each new piece of content will take you deeper into this journey of self-knowledge, manifestation, and spiritual awakening. Because in the end, what the universe most desires is to see you remember who you truly are. So remember this. You are not waiting for the universe to align. The universe is waiting for you to align. Every emotion you choose, every thought you sustain, every word you speak sends a frequency into the field, and that frequency becomes your world. The real secret isn't about forcing change. It's about becoming the change in vibration first. Because when your inner world shifts, reality has no choice but to follow. You are not a victim of your story. You are its author, and right now the pen is in your hand. If this message awakened something inside you, don't let it fade. Subscribe, stay connected, and keep expanding this consciousness with me. Because somewhere, beyond all fear and resistance, the universe is whispering one truth. You are the miracle you've been waiting for.